Okay.
Okay.
Okay, well, thank you for coming, everyone. Sara Harley's exhibition here at the center has been very well received. Some of you are joining from far afield, so I hope you're able to take in the virtual version. And we've really appreciated. Sara's been wonderful to work with, and I can't wait to hear more about your process, Sara. So thanks for offering this talk, and over to you.
Okay. Well, I do want to thank all of you for coming on such a beautiful evening. Not sure if it's as beautiful in Arkansas and New York as it is in Nova Scotia right now, but I really appreciate all of your support and your friendship, and hopefully this will be an interesting talk. I also want to thank Sue and the Chester Arts Center, of course, for hosting my exhibit. It's been a wonderful opportunity and such a lovely facility, and I've just been thrilled to have my work shown there. So tonight I'm just going to talk a bit about some of my past projects, and then we'll switch over and I'll show you the images from my exhibit and maybe talk a bit about them. And then we have some time at the end for you to ask any questions. I know sometimes it's hard to remember, so just jot your questions down and we'll deal with them at the end. I'd be happy to answer any questions you have about me or about my my work. In 2008, I satisfied a lifelong dream and moved to Nova Scotia from Ontario. When I was about 5, I traveled to Nova Scotia with my parents, and we went, I think we were mostly in Cape Breton, judging from the old slides that I have that belong to my dad. I have no memory at all of that trip, but it obviously buried itself in my subconscious because I have spent my life yearning to move to Nova Scotia. And after about 40 years, I managed to do it. When I was a teenager, I dragged a friend of mine and we drove across the country to visit Nova Scotia. And I took my husband and my son on vacation to a cottage in Nova Scotia for a couple of years, and then finally moved here in 2008. So when we traveled, when we moved here, we drove 2 cars. My husband drove our 3 dogs. And in my car, there was a cat and a load full of plants for my garden. So when we arrived, we didn't know anyone other than my stepson and daughter-in-law in Halifax. So as a way to get to know people, I joined the Bridgewater Photo Club and made some great friendships and learned a lot about photography. This is a photo of a group of photo club members from a little field trip that we did. And you can see me in the back row at the left. And this is one of the first images that I shared with the photo club. And I was really excited about this image. It was a picture of things I love, the fishing sheds, you know, and there was a heron in the water, and I was just thrilled with this picture. And the club members were very generous in gently giving me opinions and recommendations on how I could improve my photography. So I've been working on that for many years. And this is the type of image that I take now, a lot more minimal and sort of focusing in on one subject. The picture on the left was taken in my studio, otherwise known as my kitchen counter. And the picture on the right was taken at the Tangled Gardens in Grand Pré. And these are straight photographs, there's no photoshopping involved. And that's, I'll be discussing that sort of back and forth. I'm primarily, was primarily a photographer, and I'm shifting more into photographic artist realm. And that's been how my work has progressed. As a member of the photo club, I was really lucky when, or I think the whole club was lucky when club member, a woman named Cass Stone joined our photo club. She was a professional photographer from Ontario who moved back to Nova Scotia, and she joined our club and shared her knowledge with us. And I consider her my primary mentor. And my work wouldn't be what it is today without her guidance. And I've taken a couple of courses from her, and she's just been so generous in her time. And she's here with us tonight, so I just wanted to thank Cass. In 2010, I was diagnosed with breast cancer. And during the time between my diagnosis and my surgery and my radiation treatments, I needed something to help myself and give myself strength. So I adopted a tree as my personal symbol of strength. And it wasn't until a recent discussion, it was an interview that I did with Trevor Awalt from a podcast called You Can Learn Photography. And Trevor brought up the idea that I have been influenced, and my artwork has been influenced a lot by my mom's paintings. And it's something I never considered before. And I really think he was right. This particular painting, my mom did before she married my dad. And so the timing of this probably would have been the mid to late 1930s. And she did this painting as well as a companion painting, and they were on the walls of my childhood home and remained on the walls for my whole life. And now they're on my own walls. And I think maybe the connection there was what sort of brought to mind for me to use the tree as my personal symbol of strength. My mom was also diagnosed, or my mom had breast cancer, and she passed away when I was only 21. So along with adopting the tree as a personal symbol for me of strength, I also started to write some inspirational verse. And I just want to read one that I wrote to go with a tree. My roots will ground me as I reach for my dreams. With each new season, I will blossom and grow. When ill winds blow, I will bend, but not break. I will nurture and protect those who take shelter with me. I continued to write inspirational verse, and then I started writing a weekly column for the South Shore Breaker and the Chronicle Herald, loosely based on photography. It was not an instructional column at all. It was just supposed to provide a little bit of inspiration and share my love of photography and my love of Nova Scotia. And I wrote weekly columns for about 1.5 years. These are some of the headlines from the newspaper. And then in 2017, we had a devastating event in our family. My husband had a major stroke, and we all face trials and tribulations and difficult times throughout our lives. And I've had my share of difficult times through my own life. But my husband's stroke was truly devastating to me. I was an emotional wreck. It didn't handle things very well. And I needed an outlet to share my emotions and what I was going through. Not really share, I didn't intend to share it, but just to express it. And I turned to my photography to help myself deal with these emotions. I'm an introvert. I don't talk. I keep a lot of my feelings to myself, but using a visual way of communicating these feelings really helped me. And the time when I was going through this, when my husband was in the hospital for a few months, and then after he came home and was recovering at home, I discovered an artist named Brook Shaden. And she's just a young photo-based artist. She's about 30 now, I think. She does self-portraits, composited self-portraits. And at the time when I discovered her, she was offering a free course online. It was a month-long course, 5 days a week, 1 hour a day. And she shared her knowledge about creating composited art. And I decided to do this for myself. And I came up with some words that came to mind when I was dealing with all these feelings inside. And this is the first image that I created, and I called it Devastation. And from there, I went on to creating a whole series, and I called the series Stroke of Emotions. And this is the first series of images that I ever made. They're all self-portraits that have been composited. So I farmed my my photographs and my library. And when I came up with the word, I would pull different images together and then combine them all and create these images. I had no intention of sharing these with anyone. This was just something I did for myself. But life has a way of surprising you sometimes, and coming up with opportunities. And I came across a call for photographic work that that dealt with health and wellness. And it was a group exhibit put on by the Viewpoint Gallery in Halifax, Nova Scotia, in partnership with the Robert Pope Foundation. And they were looking for photographs that dealt with health and the connection between health and wellness and photography. So I submitted 5 images from Stroke of Emotions, and that was the maximum you could submit, and all 5 were accepted. So that was quite a milestone for me. First of all, I was sharing these images, which I never thought I would share with anyone. Secondly, it was the first time that I was paid by a gallery to show my work. And when I participated in the artist talk for this show, it really pushed me personally, because I had to verbalize what this art meant to me. And I think it also, excuse me, helped other people. So it really taught me that sharing emotion-based art can help not only yourself in the creation of it, but it can help other people as well. And around the same time period, I put a book together of my favorite photographs from 10 years of digital photography. The book was only for myself, and it was, I sort of went through all my library and picked out my favorites. And then I was accepted to have a solo exhibit at our local library. And I didn't know. I didn't know what I was going to exhibit. I mean, at this point, I hadn't yet shown my Stroke of Emotions images, and I didn't intend to. But I took a look at this book I had created of my favorite images, and I realized, you can see by all the red circles on there, this is just a screenshot of the layout of the book. But all the red circles are pictures that are either of birds or trees. So when I was coming up with an idea for a solo exhibit at the library, I decided that I would make composited images using birds and trees, but make images that sort of had the same theme as my Stroke of Emotions. So instead of using me as the subject, I would use birds and trees to convey this series of emotions that you go from sort of devastation through to rejuvenation. And I call the exhibit Roots and Wings. These are some of the images from the exhibit. I also wrote verse to go along with each of the images, and I put these together in about a 2-month period. And they're quite simple, composited images, usually just, you know, 1 or 2 images combined to create a new image. This is a close-up of one of the images from my Roots and Wings exhibit. This one is called Frozen. And two things from this exhibit stick in my mind. Well, first of all, it was a real achievement in my mind because it was my first solo exhibit. Secondly, somebody said to me that my images didn't actually look like photographs, they looked like paintings. And I don't know if he meant it as a criticism or a compliment, but I took it as a compliment because I wanted my images to look like paintings. So I was really excited about that. And the other thing I did, or that sticks in my mind, is I had made up little survey cards for people to fill out who had visited the exhibit. And I asked questions like, you know, which image do you like best and which image do you like least? And somebody filled out on the card that this image was they liked it the least. And the reason she said was because it made her sad. And I was thrilled with this comment because this is the first time that somebody told me that one of my images evoked an emotion in them, you know, whether it's good or bad or whatever, it just evoked an emotion. And that really sticks in my mind. And this particular image has been quite successful over the years. I've sold a few copies of it. So it obviously resonates for whatever reason with many people. After that solo exhibit, I just worked on a little project that was purely personal and didn't, you know, show the work anywhere or exhibit it. I called the project a differentiation, and it was just, my goal was to create an image a week and write verse to go with the image. I didn't do one a week. I ended up over the year, I think I did 27 images and verse that I was happy with, and I just published it in a little book for myself. This image I called I Had a Dream, and it's just a double exposure that I took along the LaHave River. And this is the verse I wrote to go with this image. I reach for the light, but the stars have fallen and lay submerged, glittering their promise like diamonds beneath the sea. This photograph is from an artist talk I did. The talk was actually on Facebook. It was during COVID when everything was shut down. And it's at the Dart Gallery in Dartmouth. I had participated in a couple of group exhibits at the Dart Gallery, and the owner, Jane McDougall, had encouraged me for months and months to put together a solo exhibit. And I was quite nervous about it because in my mind, showing my work at a gallery was a lot different than showing my work at a local library. But I finally was convinced to put something together, and this exhibit was called Flight of Fancy, and it was mostly birds. Well, I think all of the images had birds in them, and some of the images had trees as well. So I'm consistent in the things I like to create. Some of the images were straight photographs, and some of them were composited images. There was 22 images altogether, and when Jane said that she was going to show them in the month of January and the beginning of February, I didn't have much hope for any sales, but I was game to try it. So there were 22 images, and I ended up selling 18 of them, which of course I was thrilled beyond belief. I couldn't believe, that many people would want to buy art for themselves in the month of January, but there you go. You never know. You just never know what's going to happen. After my Flight of Fancy exhibit, which was a lot of composited work, I sort of had a crisis of confidence about my photography. I had run into a number of people, like photographers, who told me, that what I was doing wasn't photography. And then I had an artist tell me when she saw one of my composited pieces that looked like maybe a painting, that I was cheating because it wasn't actual painting, it was using photographs. And so I was just sort of in a little bit of a personal crisis of confidence about my work. So I decided to go back to straight photography, and I worked on a project called Trailings. And it was sort of during the whole period, the first year of COVID and restrictions. And I decided to take pictures from my daily walks that I take with my dog. They're all from the local trails in Bridgewater. And I had an artist grant that funded part of this. And so it wasn't just a photography project, although that was the primary thing. I also did some journaling, and I did a number of quilts because at the beginning of the pandemic, I taught myself how to do quilting. So I made 7 quilts as part of this project. And I ended up exhibiting, I think there's about 15 photographs. These are 3 of my favorites. They were all taken from exactly the same location. The one on the left was taken during the month of October. The one in the middle was taken in November, and the one on the right was taken in December. So I often go back to the same location when I have my camera with me, and I find it challenging and rewarding to see, the different things that you can find just in different time periods. You could be in the same location. It always boggles my mind when photographers say, oh, there's nothing to take photos of, because I just can amuse myself so easily. But after this project, Trailings, I decided I wanted to get back into creating composited photographs. And for those of you who aren't familiar with the concept, some people call it like painting with photographs. Some people call it photo collage. Some people call it digital collage. And basically what I do is I take elements from different photographs and I combine them into a brand new image. I usually have a picture in my mind that I want to create. So then I'll have this idea in my mind, and then I'll farm my photo library and pull different things and try them until I come up with something that I'm satisfied with. So I made this image. This is just a simple composite from 3 different photographs that I put together. I made this in March of last year. And I went on to create many more images, all of which were predominantly white, minimal kind of images, very stark. And from there, these are just a sample of the ones I created. From there, I moved on to little white churches. This first image here was actually inspired by a painting by Alex Colville. And his painting is called Church and Horse, but I created mine. I originally called Church and Crow. It's now entitled Elemental, but it was a tribute to Alex Colville. And this was a rather complicated image in that the fence that I brought in from a photograph I had taken had a different background. So it was very painstaking work to erase the background from all those little wires. I mean, it took me days to do. And I know some people would think that's absolutely crazy, and why would you ever do that? But I find it very calming. I find it really rewarding just to sit and do tasks like that. Just, you can blank out your mind, and I just find it very therapeutic. So I don't mind doing things like that. Although now I know I could do it a lot quicker because now I know a little bit about working with Photoshop. But at the time I had never used Photoshop. I went on to create several more images with little white churches. I tend to, when I get onto a theme, I tend to, work through that and do maybe 3 to 5 images based on that theme. It's just something I do. And at this point, I still hadn't come up with the concept of haven. But what I do when I make images is I print them out in like small format, like maybe 4x6, and I put them on a bulletin board in my office, which you might be able to see behind my shoulder here. I pin them up, and then I'll, after I do a bunch of them, I'll kind of look at them and wonder if there's any connection between the images, or what's going on in my head, or just try and make some kind of sense out of them. So I came to the conclusion that these images, these stark, minimalist images, were my reaction to dealing with the pandemic, which really surprised me because I'm an introvert, I'm a homebody, not a very social person. So, staying at home, I didn't think it was a problem at all, but maybe it was. And it just got me to thinking about why I was creating these images. So I sat down and I wrote down an artist statement. And you can read along with me, but I'll just read it out. Over the past 2 years, our changed world has caused a myriad of emotions about the importance of home and security, which has led me to explore the concept of haven. The dichotomy between the safety of our own environment and the threat of the unknown from without has contributed to increased levels of social anxiety. Whether based in reality or perceived, the situation has challenged us to examine our thoughts and ourselves. What makes us feel safe? Where do we take comfort? This exhibit is an exploration of many different concepts of haven. I've mentioned a couple of photographic artists that have impacted my work in big ways. And the third person, although she doesn't know it, that really impacted my work is a woman by the name of Maggie Taylor. And Maggie puts together composited digital collages. And I stumbled across her work by accident. I was in early 2021, I was doing a search online for surreal photographers. And I came up with the name of Jerry Elsman. And some of you may know his work. He recently passed away, but he was creating composited images using the darkroom. So he had 12 enlargers in his darkroom, and he would go and pick different elements from different photographs and blend them all together and create his work through the darkroom. And when Photoshop first came up with their program, they approached Jerry Elsman to create his work using Photoshop instead. And he wasn't interested. He preferred to work in the darkroom. But at the time, he was married to Maggie Taylor. And Maggie was really interested in Photoshop. And she sort of has used Photoshop from the very beginning. And she creates work mostly with a scanner, some photographs. Her work is really kind of freaky and wild and wonderful. It's not really my thing, but I can really appreciate the talent behind what she does. And I had the opportunity of taking a course from Maggie on Zoom last November. So I signed up for the course. I received an art grant to help me pay for that. And it was a 6-session course. Each session was 2 hours. It was by Zoom. And Maggie would go through how she used Photoshop to create her images. And then she would, at the end of the 2 hours, give us files to work with, and we were to recreate these files as homework before our next session. Well, before the end of the 6 sessions, I was so excited about all this knowledge I was learning. I was just so excited. I started not doing my homework, and I was making my own creations instead. And this is the first image that I made with all this newfound knowledge. So this image is very special to me. It's called The Dreamer. And for that reason, I chose it as the poster image for this Haven project. Excuse me. I mentioned that when I make work, I usually tend to work in little series. So I made The Dreamer, and then these 2 images that are also in the exhibit sort of go with The Dreamer in my mind because they're all kind of the same color color-based, and they're all kind of nighttime, dreamy kind of images. The one on the left, Visitors, is very special to me. Mentioned my mom's painting before. Well, the cottage and the two large trees in this image were actually from a painting that my mom did also before she married my dad. So again, this was probably from the mid to late 1930s, and it really means a lot to me, this image, because, you know, it's my own, sort of blending my own artwork with my mom's. I lost her when I was quite young, so it makes me feel really close to her. And the image Hideaway I created for all the introverts in the world. I did a few images that I think of to myself as environmental based images. I think it was like 2013 when my husband John and I were out for a car ride, and we came across this forest that had been clear cut, and it created such an emotional response in me that I have been working for years at trying to create some kind of image that sort of conveyed this feeling that I felt when I looked at that clear cut. And the first one, or one of the images I created, you saw earlier from my Stroke of Emotions series, and it was Devastation. And the same clear cut I used for both these images. These images I created to address the environmental issues, but in a little bit more positive way. The one on the left is actually being shown right now for a period of 6 months at an online exhibit by a UK gallery. So I was quite thrilled when I was accepted, when this image was accepted for that. I think there were about 600 images submitted for this show, and no, 400 images were submitted and 60 were chosen. So anyway, I was quite honored about that. And the one on the right, In Our Hands, was actually inspired by the photographer that I mentioned a minute ago, Jerry Elsman. He created an image years and years ago. It's on the cover of one of his books, and it was a pair of hands coming out of a, I think a sidewalk, some kind of concrete, and holding a nest. And that was sort of the inspiration behind this image. And this one is a nod to climate change. I call it Oasis. So Haven in my mind is not just like a home or a place, but it could be a special spot that we go to, or maybe a hobby that we do, just somewhere where we go to feel safe and feel good and comfortable. And reading for me is something that I take comfort in. So I created this image called Turning the Page. Lots of photographers enjoy taking photographs of abandoned buildings, and I am no exception. I spent time, every time I see an abandoned house, I want to go and take pictures of it. I don't go inside, but I take pictures, you know, from outside, standing, looking through a window. And then, of course, I brought in all these elements. If you take your animal to the South Shore vet, you might recognize the cat in this picture, because this cat lives at the vet. And I took a picture of it when I was during the COVID times when we had to wait in our car for our appointment. So I just saw the cat waiting there to get into the vet and thought it was funny. Probably the only animal you'd ever see wanting to go into the vet. But I snapped this picture of the cat out my car window. Yet another abandoned home, and this one is a nod to the movie Wizard of Oz. There's no where Dorothy says there's no place like home. I just had this image in my mind that I wanted to make an image with red shoes, so I pulled this together. And actually, most of the work that went into this image was in cleaning up the base image that I used. This abandoned place had stuff everywhere, like wires, and I think there was an overturned stove and tons of boxes and just all kinds of stuff laying everywhere. So I painstakingly removed a lot of that to simplify the image. And then I added some flowers, a couple of vases of flowers and the shoes. And this is one of my favorite images from the exhibit. You may notice that some of my images tend to have maybe a balance of sadness and decay balanced with happiness and hopefulness. And I think these two images do that. This is the same abandoned home. Actually, I did go inside this one for both these images, and the same sort of concept of hope somewhere. The cat in the left-hand picture is actually my own cat, Myrtle. She doesn't know she's a star. I thought it might be fun for you to see how my mind works and the progress that I made last year in my artistic endeavors. I had this concept about freedom, and the one at the top left of your screen is the first one I made, and it's a concept of, you know, fairly common concept, I guess, you know, a cage, an open cage, and a bird flying out of it. So this one is a simple composite of 3 things. I made that early last year. The one on the bottom left is a self-portrait of me holding the cage, and same idea, bird flying away. And I like this image, but I'm not a fan of using people in my work. I don't know why. I just like using nature instead to sort of portray humanistic elements. So after I took the course with Maggie Taylor, it may look like a simple image, but there's a lot more to this final freedom. And my goal when I create images is to create things that might be simple to when you first take a first glance, it might seem simple, but if you look at it more, you might discover more things. I really want people to spend time sort of looking through my images. So rather than the simplistic picture of just a crow flying away from a cage, this one might be a little more complicated when you take some time to look at it. And the scenery in the background, this whole scene is set on a stage. So the scenery in the background is actually on a curtain. So is the crow really free or not free? That's up to you to decide. And I really personally like this little rat that's peeking out from under the curtain. As I said a couple times before, when I make an image, I like to create sort of a mini series, and I started a mini series about life as a stage. So these are 2 kind of in my, although they're in the Haven exhibit, they also in my mind are the impetus for yet another exhibit maybe down the road of life as a stage. Anyway, false sense of security. You see the goldfish in there and the cat below. And then I decided that wasn't quite enough, and I added a little dog nose poking out from behind the curtain. That's just my sense of humor coming through, I guess, in my work. And a now or never on the right. You can read into it whatever you want. I don't know if you'll be able to see that. The clock that the crow is holding is set at 5 to 12. Haven to me, like I mentioned, might not be, you know, a literal home. It might be just a place you go to find comfort. So these are 2 more images I created where you may feel a sense of peace and contentment. The reading room on the left and tranquility on the right. And Haven might not be a place at all. It might be a person, it might be your romantic partner, it might be a friend or a family member. But these images were all created with that in mind, that your Haven is your special person in your life. Well, you know that birds are special to me and have special meaning to me. And flocks of flying birds, just I can't describe how I feel whenever I see a flock of birds flying. I feel exhilarated, a sense of power and freedom. I stop in my tracks every time I see a group of birds flying together. I don't know what it is. These birds were actually a murmuration of starlings that I took in Bridgewater. I've imported them into this scene. But I took this photograph, well, many photographs of these murmuration of starlings back in 2016. I went out, I discovered about this flock of birds when I was out to dinner with a group of people from my photo club, and saw them sort of fly by the window, and immediately stopped listening to everybody talking at the table and only paid attention to these birds. So I went back with my quote good camera the next night and spent about an hour taking hundreds of photographs of these starlings that were all flying around getting ready to roost for the night. And I came back home raving about these starlings, and my husband decided he was going to join me the next night. So John and I went out the next night, and he couldn't believe that I was so thrilled. I mean, it just looked like an aerial ballet to me. I was just mesmerized. And John, it meant nothing to him. So it just goes to show that what's special to one person isn't necessarily special to someone else. And we're getting close to wrapping up here. Transition I made early last year. It was during the time where our COVID restrictions were lifting a bit, and we were seeing a bit more hope for a social future. So it's just, when I first made the image, it was just a snow image and everything was, bleak. But I decided to combine the change between sort of the bleakness of winter and the hope of summer. And the quilter on the right, I mentioned earlier that I spent the first year of COVID quilting, and I made 11 quilts in 12 months. And these quilts, these 6 quilts were 6 of the 11 quilts that I made. So you could say that a lot of time was put into this image, but not necessarily compositing the photographs. I feel this real sense of peacefulness and comfort in a landscape that is quite barren. Many people might look at these images and feel a sense of isolation, but to me, I just feel peace when I look at these sort of peace and solitude. And these are the last 2 images in the show. There's 29 images altogether in the exhibit. 23 of them were made from November to March, and a few were made early last year. These both these images sort of go together in my mind because it's the same general concept. In a lot of my images, I'd like to portray a sense of hope, maybe through some tough times. We can all sort of take hope that we might have a brighter future. And so both of these images were created with that thought in mind. I have been really blessed with how well this whole series has been received. Haven, the images in Haven have that I've created are very personal to me, and they have a lot of meaning to me. And I've really been thrilled about how well they've been received, not only through this exhibit, but various parts of the world. Actually, I've done an artist talk about images in this exhibit to the Pasadena Photo Arts. I was selected as a photographer to watch based on images from this collection. They've been published in various magazines, both online and in print. And I've just been so fortunate and so thankful for what these images have done for my artistic expression. As part of this exhibit, I prepared a exhibit guide. I don't know if you can see that. And they're available at the gallery at the Chester Arts Center. They're $20 and they include all the images from the exhibit and a few extra images and just some thoughts that I had when I was putting them together. You can buy one at the gallery or you can order one through me, and my email address is at the top of the page. They're $20, so you can just e-transfer me the money if you'd like to pick up a magazine from me May 30th or later, or I can mail one out to you for an extra $5, so it'd be $25. And I donate $5 from the sale of each exhibit guide to the gallery, as well as 30% of any sales that I do. 30% I am donating to the gallery. So I hope you'll consider buying a guide. And that wraps up my presentation, but I'd be really happy to answer any questions you have.